So yeah, let's talk about SGA first, and then we'll talk about some early retirement stuff. So SGA, substantial gainful activity. It's the amount of money that if you were able to make this much, then Social Security will say that, well, this much or more. Social Security will say you're not disabled then because you were able to be gainfully employed.
You're gainfully employed, right?
Yeah.
And
So technically, there is a way for people to be working 1 day a week, 2 days a week. I make $200 a month or $500 a month, and still technically qualify for SSDI, for disability benefits.
right. Well, first of all, SGA, and we've talked about it before on the podcast, but SGA stands for Substantial Gainful Activity. And a judge early on when I started my practice 20 years ago or so, the judge basically said, it's got to be the S, it's got to be the G, and it's got to be the A. It's got to be substantial, it's got to be gainful, and it's got to be activity. Activity could be anything. I mow my uncle's lawn.
Yeah.
And he doesn't pay me. Well, that's activity, but it's not gainful because you're not getting any money. I mow my uncle's lawn. It's activity. He gives me $50 every time that I do it. That's gainful. And then, is it substantial? It's $50. How often do you mow his lawn? Twice a month. You're making $100 a month. No, it's not substantial.
Yeah.
So it's got to be all. It's got to be substantial. It's got to be gainful. You got to make money at it. It's got to be activity. You're actually involved in it. And this also comes up, and this is kind of a little bit aside, but I want to say this. A lot of people who have a 401k or have built up sick leave or annual leave, vacation time, anything like that, and they stop working in July, and their activity has stopped in July, and their employer pays them, maybe goes all the way through August. And so what's happening is you see this earnings history that, whoa, you told Social Security you stopped working in July, but we're seeing substantial earnings in wages in August. What's going on there? That they paid me for that. Okay, it was substantial. It's over the limit. It's gainful. Is it activity? No, it's not activity. No, I didn't. I wasn't working. I stopped working in July. They owed me money. They owed me money for my leave, stuff like that. And judges are really cool about that. The lower levels, not so much, but the judges are really cool about, okay, that makes sense to me. And they wouldn't hold that against you. So I know that's kind of an aside, but it is part of the disability program, and it is a topic that comes up quite frequently in hearings.
Yeah, and I'm very careful on how I phrase it when I'm telling a client about this, because a lot of times they say they're working. I ask them how much they're working, how much they're making, and then I have to explain to them how SGA works. And I want to say, if you're able to make a livable wage, then you would not qualify. But you can't really say that because SGA is not. It changes every year, so Google it. But it's like $16.90 a month or something.
Yeah.
It's not really a livable wage, so you can't say that.
Well, and then again, it's in New York State, in Connecticut, in all of California, Oregon, Washington, absolutely not. In Hattiesburg, Mississippi, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, the
Right.
different parts of the countries, the cost of living is wildly different. Not just different, wildly different. So maybe, but yeah, one of our policies is that I don't like giving out the amount. If somebody calls me up and says, "Well, I'm working a few hours, how much can I make?" Well, you look it up. Because one, you're right, it changes every January. Cost of living and the SGA amount goes up. But I also don't want to give them, we'll take your case if you're under the amount by $20. No. If you're working and you're working, let's say you're making $15 an hour, which is almost twice the minimum wage. $15 an hour. You're working 10 hours a week. Okay. Well, you're never over the limit in that amount. You're making $150 a week. So you're making $600 a month. It's not even close to the limit. And the question that we will ask you, and it's usually going to be you at intake asking that question, is why aren't you working more, and what would happen if you did? Okay, you're working 10 hours a week. You're making $15, which is okay. but why don't you work 20 hours? Oh, there's no way that I can do that. I'm having a hard enough time with either a bodily problem, or I'm having enough time, concentrating and staying on task. My boss is already yelling at me that I forget things or whatever. And that's the whole picture, and that's what we'd want to know, whether it's a case that I would take. However, if you come to us and you say, well, I'm making, $15 an hour, I'm working 20 hours a week, and I know I can do that because I've been online and I see that that's still a little bit under SGA, that's a big red flag to us. It's like, could you pass the truth test if I or somebody from Social Security said, what about 30 hours a week? A couple hours a day. From 20 to 30 is a couple more hours a day. You better have a really good explanation for why you couldn't do that, because we're probably going to, this person, it looks like they're trying to get in under the limit instead of working as much as they can, but they just can't do it. Big difference. A disabled person, if they offered me, 15 hours instead of my 10 hours, I'd try it. In fact, Mr. Groves, I tried it 3 weeks ago, and I had to miss the next 3 days because I was in such pain. Okay, that's what a disabled person would say.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas, I'm working 20 hours a week, and, have you tried to work 30? No. I'm not going to do that. Well, what if your boss said, hey, if you don't come in and work 30 hours, I got to let you go because I need 30 hours a week. What would happen? Well, that put me over the limit.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
So that's why you're not working.
Yeah, a disabled person wouldn't say that, okay, So anyway, I think I've gotten off again, but that's.
Yeah, I mean, that's for me, that it's a really quick red flag.
Oh, yeah.
Because once I hear a client say something like, well, I'm allowed to make this much, right?
Yeah,
Or I'm allowed to work part-time. It's like,
Yeah.
what do you mean you're allowed to work part-time?
Yeah,
It's like, if you can work more than that, you're not disabled.
Yeah.
I mean, you can really just break it down to, if you're working part-time under SGA, and the only reason you're under SGA is because there's no way you could be above SGA. There's no way that you could work more. You've tried to work more.
Yeah.
Like you said, bodily, maybe you work and then the next day you can barely get out of bed because your back hurts so much.
Sure.
Where I talk to a lot of mental health clients to where if they were working full time, they would just, they would have a panic attack or
Sure.
something like that.
Yeah.
That's a valid reason. And it helps us when we see that, they're working part-time, they're working under SGA, and they've been working part-time under SGA, that same schedule, for a couple years.
Right.
And they've tried to work full-time, and they just can't do it.
And that is indicative of disability. I have a hearing coming up next month at the judge's office, and I love it when the judge's office, they're proving to me, they tell me that they're reviewing the file way in advance of the hearing, and it's kind of dubious to me, especially talking to some of them who, did you read my brief? What brief? Well,
Yeah.
But anyway, this judge, she actually, she asked her one of the senior attorneys to call my office. Mr. So-and-so's conditions, I believe, are disabling. However, he's got some earnings in such and such quarter, and they're not above SGA. They're way below. But she's got to deal with the earnings because that's her job. And called him up, and he said the exact same thing. Basically, I work 2 days a week, and it's rare for me to work back-to-back days, because if I work on Monday and then I work again on Tuesday, I'm down for the rest of the week. So usually I work on Monday, and then I kind of take a day to try to, get all the kinks out. And then Wednesday I'll do it, but then I'm done until the weekend. And so, I'm working 2 days a week. Have you tried to work, more? Yeah. I did this job, and that's the one that's showing up. And I did it for a week, solid, 5 days in a row. And it literally sent me to the hospital.
Yeah.
And I said, I remember seeing that hospital record. Yeah, they had to give you morphine. You were in such pain. Yeah, that's the one. That's indicative of disability. And the SGA, but it wasn't SGA, but the earnings that they had didn't disqualify them. I get to tell the judge, good catch, and this is what this was. Mm-hmm. And we're pretty sure, even though the hearing's scheduled, we're pretty sure that she's just going to allow the case. It's OTR, which means on the record. She's not going to She's not going to bother making him come in or appear by phone to testify. She sees that the medical records do show that he's disabled.
Yeah. In this entire process, the two most common things that, well, in my opinion, you might agree or disagree, but the two most common things that I hear all the time or complaints rather, is if I'm disabled, why do I have to go through this whole process? Why do I have to prove I'm disabled? And then the second thing is the earnings bit, which is, well, what am I supposed to do? It takes, right now 6 to 8 months for an initial decision. If I'm denied another 6 to 8 months, how am I going to survive? I gotta do something here.
Right.
And those are the main two things I hear, and there's really not a good answer.
Right. It's, that's been a problem, well before. I started with disability when, the internet was in its infancy. And I started my practice when still a lot of people weren't using the internet. But now that they are, and you see ads all the time on all of the social platforms, have you been told that you can't work and draw a disability? Well, that's not true. You can. It's like,
It's just so misleading.
Yes, and so we have to fight that. It's like, that ad was actually true, but what the ad's trying to get you to do, which is, of course, click or call that firm. If you go down that road and you're working, when you get to us, no, I can't help you. And it's like in a hearing, and this happens quite a bit. And it is the worst possible thing that you can say. And you've probably already said it to me in our prep, and I warn you, if you say that in front of a judge, you better have a good explanation. And the words that we hear are, well, those earnings are because I had to do something.
Yep.
I had to do something. And so the judge's question is almost always going to be, all right, let's say that I deny your case. Do you have to do something? Are you going to go back to work? And that's a really, really scary question for a disability claimant in a hearing, because what are you going to say? You just told him that you had to do something, and that's why these over SGA earnings have showed up in your file. I worked for 5 months because, I had to pay my car insurance, or, I had to feed my kids. These are all super, absolutely everybody on planet Earth, except really, really rich folks. They deal with these things. They have to work because they have to pay their bills. They have to pay their rent. They have to pay their mortgage. They have to pay a car note. They have to buy food. They have to, feed and clothe their children. These are all things, and they're absolutely valid. But as harsh as it is for us to say on this end, disability benefits are for those who can't do that. I had to do something, but I couldn't. Oh, okay. Well, that's what a disabled person would say.
Yeah.
Well, what happened? Well, I had to borrow money from from my mom, or the church had to give us money, to buy groceries that month. That sucks. But that's what a disabled person would say.
Yeah.
Not that, well, I went to work because I had to do something. Well, disabled people, they're just like that. They have to do something, but they can't.
Yeah.
Or they try and they fail, which is, of course, indicative of disability. So just, as harsh as it is, if you are one of those persons who just tough it out, toughen it out, well, welcome to, tens of millions of other people who are toughing it out. Mm-hmm. You're not disabled under Social Security's law. Disability is for people who they try, but they can't tough it out. They just can't make it. Their physical conditions and or their mental health just will not allow them to make it through an 8-hour workday, much less a 40-hour work week. And again, that's hard to say to people. Like you said, it's like, this program is not for somebody who I had to do something and therefore, I went to work. Okay. Well, wait a minute, but you're applying for disability. Yeah. I want to get my benefits. Could you do something now? Well, if I pushed myself, I'd be in pain. A lot of people are in pain and they're working. Well, I push myself, and I get home and I'm so mentally fried that I pass out on the couch at 5 o'clock in the afternoon every day. A lot of people, millions, I would say, people that are like that. They grind it through a work day. They get home and they just collapse on a couch, and they get up the next morning and they do it again. Hard, grueling, grinding, but you're not disabled under the law.
Yeah.
And disability is for people who could not do that. They would try, but they would fail.
Yeah, and it's like I've said before, what I tell clients, there's a lot of different disability programs, but with Social Security disability, it's not a program for if you're in pain while working. It's not a program to make accommodations while you're working. It is if you were unable to work substantial, work full-time or over that amount. If you're unable to do that due to your health, that's when you qualify.
That's right.
And so, yeah, it's funny how consistent that phrase is, I had to do something.
I had to do something.
Yeah, because we get it. I mean, we know what they're saying, and it probably makes you mad when that's the first time you've heard them say that, and you've had their case for 2 years.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make me mad when it's the first time I've spoken to someone and they're like, yeah, I'm going to have, maybe they haven't even gone back to work yet.
Right.
They're out of work for 2 months, and I ask them if they think they're going to be able to return, and they say, well, yeah, I'm going to have to do something. It's like, well, that's tricky.
And how many calls do you get? I know I see them when they come through on websites, email. I'm getting to my wit's end here. I know I'm going to have to quit soon. It's like, I don't really even want to talk to you if you're still working. It's like, you're going to have to quit soon. Yeah, so you're planning on quitting. If you're planning on quitting because of your health, call us when you actually do quit, and make sure that when you do quit, that there's some documentation that you had to quit due to your health.
Yep.
Not just that, I had enough. A lot of people have had enough. And a lot of people have had enough and stopped working, and they're just getting by. But that's not necessarily disability either. Disability is if they tried, that they just absolutely had to go back to work, they're going to get kicked out. They weren't going to have any kind of groceries. There was no social safety net for them, no food stamps, no anything. Could they go back to work? No, they would fail at it. That's a disabled person.
Yeah.
It is, and that's sad, but that is the way it is. And I'll give you the clinical definition. Having an impairment or a combination of impairments for 12 consecutive months that keep you from doing any type of work on a substantial basis, or having a condition that is expected to result in death. That's Social Security's definition. It's been their definition since they started the disability program. And, if you're able to skirt that definition, you're not disabled.
Yep. Yeah, and we're using the definitions, and we're telling the facts, and people that say I have to do something, or how am I supposed to live on that, or I can't believe it takes this long. Right. We are in agreement with all of those things.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But we can't, we're not going to start a lawsuit against Social Security for them to change the system.
Right. I mean that's exactly right.
That's a completely different thing.
That's the system that we live in. That's the system that we operate in. And it's the same thing. We've talked about this a million times. Why should I have to fill out forms?
Yeah.
Okay, because that's the system that you're in. That's the requirement. Why do I have to prove my case? Why can't they just read my medical records? Because that's the system. That's, people who were much more powerful than you and I came up with this system decades ago and said, you have to prove your case. It has to show this. You can't make this amount of money. You have, all of this criteria. It's a program, and it is a program with rules. And if you don't follow those rules or you don't meet those rules, you don't qualify for the benefits. And the thing is that I know it makes people angry, but they really wouldn't be the same kind of angry if they were playing Monopoly with a family member and they just started, taking people's money. Well, I'm changing the rules. I mean, Well, you got to play by the rules. Why do I want to take your money, so I'm, give me that. It's like, you wouldn't do that in any other aspect of your life. You realize that there are rules, there are parameters that you have to stay within, there are rules that you have to follow, and then you get in Social Security. Well, I know that's the rule, but I'm not going to fill out their form.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not going to go to that exam they've scheduled for me and that they're paying for me and that they'll pay me to travel to. Okay. Let me know how that works out for you.
Yeah.
There's a reason that 70+% of cases at the initial and reconsideration level are denied. There's a reason for that. It's not just Social Security is mean. Social Security is mean, by the way, but that's not the reason that so many people are denied. And it's growing. It's the strangest thing.
Mm-hmm.
There are tons of denials that are not even medical denials. We sent Mr. Smith his work questionnaire, and he's 58 years old, so we need to know it's part of the rules, it's part of the law. We have to know whether he can go back to his past work, or if he can only do work in the national economy, and it literally is the difference between an allowance and a denial. But Mr. Smith decided not to send in his work history report. We called him. He hasn't called us back, and we've given him plenty of time, and we're denying the case.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Smith calls us, why'd they deny me?
Yeah.
Did you send in that form that you're supposed to send in? That's your job. No, it's not my job.
Right.
It's your form that you have to complete. I can help you. I can advise you on it, but you never even called us about it. So you didn't really play by the rules. You didn't stay within the parameters of the program, and then you're angry about it because you got denied. Or up front, you're angry about it because you don't qualify. Well, there's nothing that my firm can do. There's nothing that any firm can do. If you have a problem with it, and a lot of us do, call your congressman.
Yeah. Allow me to call the president and tell him to allow you.
Yeah. I mean, it's a law that's been in place longer than I've been alive, and I've been alive for a while. So yeah, it's, there's not a whole lot that we can do. We can agree with you, but I will never go outside the parameters of the program, and I will never bend the rules, because that's, one, it's not ethical, and two, I value my practice, and the people who work for me count on me. So I'm not going to sabotage my practice because I just don't think the rules are fair.
Yeah. Yeah. The last thing I'll say, for kind of to wrap it up, is we do talk pretty negatively about the program because we're responding to how frustrated our clients are.
Sure.
Which makes sense, justifiably. But with that being said, if you apply and you do fill out the forms and you are disabled, we're really good at our job.
Yeah.
And if you go through the process, we win a lot of cases. There are, I think there are, like, total amount of people on Social Security. It's over 10 million people.
Oh yeah. There's people.
So it's not, a lot of people get denied, but it's not like everyone gets denied.
Right.
Like, there is a light at the end of the tunnel if you'll just put up with it and you'll work with us and allow us to win your case.
Yeah, there are the outlier cases, and I had one in January last month, a couple months ago, and I had her since 2019. So I've had her in October. It would be 7 years. So I had her about 6 years, 6.5 years. Wow, why did you have her so long? First hearing denied, appealed, appeals council rubber stamped, took it to federal court, remanded, came back for another appeal or another hearing, had the hearing, same judge denied again, appeal to the appeals council, they rubber stamped again. This is garbage. Sent it to FTC, see if one of our attorney partners would take it. Yes, she did. Got remanded again, comes back for the third hearing, can't go back to the same judge who's denied her twice, thank goodness, win the case. Yeah, all that took 6.5 years, but my client won the case. Social Security finally admitted, we made a mistake when we denied you twice at the hearing level. So,
Yeah.
So things turned out okay. Big chunk of back pay because it took so long. That is an outlier. That's, that doesn't,
Usually doesn't
Don't
take
you don't have to
6
expect
years,
for
yeah.
6 6 years of this, but 6 years of this. But we are one of those bulldog firms that if I believe in your case, and I tell this to my clients up front, if I believe in your case and you cooperate with me, I will go as far as you'll let me go with your case.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. A lot of firms will not take a case to the appeals council, which blows me away. They thought the case had merit in front of a judge. The judge just denies them. I'm dropping the case. What do you mean you're dropping the case? The judge could be wrong. The judge could misapply the rules. The judge may not have seen things that you and I are seeing. You're dropping the case? I don't do that. If I take a case to a hearing, unless the medical evidence is just poor, and sometimes it is, but it doesn't happen very often because we build our cases. But unless the medical evidence is poor or my client self-sabotages, and if you go into a hearing and you tell the judge that you can stand for 2 hours and that you can walk for 3 hours and that you don't have any problem sitting and that you can concentrate without, and I travel to Florida 3 times a week or 3 times a month or 3 times a year, or I do this and I'm able to do this, and you testify that you're able to do ability, and I'm like, I thought we were applying for disability, but you do that in a hearing. I can't appeal that case by saying, well, my client was lying in the hearing.
Yeah.
So what she really meant, and so in those cases, I'm still a bulldog, but I probably won't take your case as far as I can take it. But for the vast, vast, vast majority of cases, well north of 90%, if I believe your case had merit, to the extent that I would take it in front of a judge, puff out my chest and make those arguments. If the judge denies you, north of 90% of the time, I'm going to take the case to the appeals council. And if they rubber stamp it, which they do a lot, I'm going to try to partner with an attorney to take the case to federal district court. Our success rate then is astronomical. I mean, it's like we probably get like 75% of the cases that we take to federal court remanded. So, I mean, that's being a bulldog.
Yep.
And if I believe you're disabled, then I'm going to take it as far as I can.
All right. We'll leave it there.
Cool.
If you have a question about your disability case, drop it in the comment section below, and we will do our best to answer it in the next episode.